Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
It's time for the show that brings the magic right to your speakers. Ears up!
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Man, I'm excited for this show. I know I say that all the time, but I really am for this one because I did a lot of work on it. And
it sounds like it.
I haven't done that in a while. I mean, I guess I have. I don't know, maybe I'm just a liar tonight, but I've done a ton of work on this. This show is a lot. I'm excited about it, and I'm also really nervous because these shows don't... I have a hard time putting stuff together. Eric, I was messaging you the other day. It's
Right.
like, I'm good at research. I can research. I can do all that. I can compile information, but it's getting a thread together of said information and putting it in a coherent way to tell a good story. As Bev would say, nay, nay, nay. I am not very good at that. At least I don't think. I'm not very confident in my skills or my ability to do so.
I
So
think
we'll
you
see
do
how it
just
goes.
fine. I think you're a little less confident in yourself than you should be.
Well, I appreciate
having
that.
just listened to The Pyramid, the Eye, and the Ears.
Oh, yes,
earlier
you heard
today.
that one. The latest Patreon only conspiracy theory. What one was that about? Walt and the
FBI.
Yeah, the Walt's FBI file. We dug into that a little bit.
Where you said it was the all true conspiracy theory.
Yes, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's exactly true. It happened. Is a thing.
You and Dan had a great time. I enjoyed it very much.
It was a good time. I like Dan on the shows. We both sort of like show our cards politically, but it's all in good fun. So hopefully no one's offended. And if you are, let me know. I don't know. I'm not going to do anything with it.
If you are offended, please increase your patron level.
Yeah, that'll be. It's like carbon credits.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, to make up for it.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's a good time. I do appreciate Dan's work on that show and basically just, jokes. And that's always fun. But yeah, this show is good. We're going to be talking about Walt Disney and his trip to South America to talk about basically as part of the Good Neighbor program that the United States instilled to kind of get to know our Latin neighbors a little bit better. And by that, I mean, what resources did they have that we could then take? But that's a different story. We'll maybe get into a little bit of that too. But I'm telling Taryn, like, my problem with these shows is that anything in Walt's life, I want to know the context in, because we already know the stuff that he did, but I want to know why it happened. And that's where I go down the rabbit hole. That's where I go a little bit deeper into some research about, like, so for Walt's journey, there's a lot of political context with regards to that. And then what happened afterwards. And so there's a lot of, so I discuss a lot of that. So in the trip itself, there's not a whole lot because there's like books written about it. And so you can't get everything, because at some point it's basically a trip report on what he did. And that's not very interesting. So I kind of highlighted a lot of the interesting stuff. There's a great movie on Disney Plus called Walt and El Grupo, which I definitely recommend people watch. If you are into Walt Disney history, not the company, but the man, watch it. It's a travel log. It's almost 2 hours. And it's a lot of people just going around having fun. But there are people that you've heard about on this show for years. People you've read about, works of theirs that you've seen in the parks. Mary Blair is in there. Walt Disney's there doing dances and eating barbecue with a knife and having a knife fight and just all this stuff, right? These are the things you never really see. And it's really great.
It's who came with him that's interesting. Like which people did he bring with, and what did that mean for their overall relationship? I'm sure you'll have plenty to say about her. It was Herb Ryman that
Herb Ryman was one of the people. Yeah.
Like him and his wife. Like that's a big deal to be invited to go along with Walt and Lily and the whole crew
for like 12 weeks or something like
right.
that. It was some people stayed longer, like Lee and Mary Blair. They stayed longer and they went into different parts of South America, Latin America. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. The point is there's a lot going on and there's a lot to even dive deeper into, but it all culminated with 2 movies, Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros, and a bunch of different shorts that we'll talk about as well. But there's a lot of context, a lot of content to be mined, and it's great. It's going to be a good time. But before we jump into that, if you're planning a trip to the parks, you know, much like Walt was planning a trip to South America, if you want to go and see some of the things that came out of this trip in the parks, then you go book a trip to Walt Disney World through Concierge. You go to concierge.com. They will fly you right into the World Pavilion in Epcot. They'll actually land on the top of that pyramid in the Mexico Pavilion, which there's a ride in there, narrated, hosted by one of the characters we'll be talking about, Jose Carroca, who was generated from this trip to Brazil. And you can go see him. And concierge will parachute you in. They won't even land the plane. Is you comfortable? Great. Boom. And they kick you out.
I really should do an episode about the alternative ways to get to Disneyland and Walt Disney World.
Should.
Helicopter, plane.
Oh man, that'd be fun
for both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to take a helicopter.
I'll add that to the list.
Yeah.
You could take a helicopter from LAX to Disneyland Hotel.
You can still currently to this day.
No, you could.
You could. Okay.
You could.
I was going to say,
back in the day.
I'm disappointed that I didn't know that. Yeah, but that'll be great. So anyway, go to concierge.com. Let them help you book your next trip to one of the Disney parks or just kind of anywhere, really. Hit them up. They're good people. Even if you want to book hotel rooms somewhere else and you don't really know what to do, just have them do it. It'll be fine. It'll be great. And they don't charge you anything else but what the parks charge you. And you get a whole bunch of different stuff to go along with that. Complimentary services like reservation confirmation and restaurant bookings and free advice, stuff like that. So it's a good service to have in your back pocket, especially the mess that is Disney Genie Plus. And I tell you, speaking of pluses, speaking of Disney Plus, I had a hell of a time with that technology, man. I don't know what happened. It was like down or there was something, but I tried to watch
El Grupo.
Try to watch Walt and El Grupo, man. And, so we have the Shield, Android Shield streamer box thing. It's like a Roku, but whatever. And I can get on Disney Plus just fine. Look for the thing, see the little thumbnail there. Great. Click on it. And it's just a wheel.
Oh, no.
Spinny for like 5 to 10 minutes. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I tried to reset my password. I couldn't do it because it gives you like a code, but I put the code in but then the thing says, oh, the code's not right. And I'm like, what's going on? How do I fix this? You have to send an email. There was no easy access. Today I found out there's a chat, but I sent an email. I was like, well, this is stupid. And now I don't want to rent it for $4. I'm already paying for
1998.
Dude, it was gross. So I find there's a chat today. I go, okay, fill out the form in the chat or whatever. Wheel spinning. Never connects me to the chat. 5 minutes sitting there watching the wheel spin. And it's not even like you have reached the chat assistant. My name is, Ralph and whatever, right? There's none of that.
Right.
No typing. Then there's a phone number. I'm like, it's 2004. Okay. I'm going to call. I'll be damned, Eric, if they didn't pick right up.
Oh, wow.
There was no waiting. My phone said like 5 minutes, as it's a Google services where it's like approximate wait time is 5 minutes. No, there's no wait time. Technical issues, boom, got me up and running, and everything just started to work. But he's like, yeah, you're not the only one who has this problem right now. But I was really impressed with the way that, and also disappointed. The chat wouldn't work because I don't want to talk on the phone. I do enough talking. The phone doesn't interest me anymore. So,
but there was a person on the other end.
There was a person on the other end.
Oh, thank goodness. If I didn't answer a call today, they were going to fire me. Oh, thank you for calling, man. Sir.
Yeah. This guy's just like unplugging. He's like next to him. There's a computer tower that's unplugged and it just says chat bot. He's like, I'm going to earn my money today.
That AI machine is going down.
Yeah.
It's John Henry versus the the locomotive.
I read an article. I didn't read an article. I read about an article.
You read about an article.
I read about an article.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
This
these
dude,
days.
I forget what platform he's writing for, but he basically tried out a bunch of these dating chatbots. So you can get a chatbot to be like your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your partner or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And you can you feed it a bunch of information about yourself, and it has different personalities you can pick and whatever. And he's like, I tried like 10 or 15 of these, which I didn't even really know there was a thing, much less 10 or 15 of them. And he goes, it's weird, but eventually they all just devolved into really horny talk, and it was just weird. He's like, I could see this being the future for like people who are very lonely, and that's understandable. But the bugs in the system are that it just sort of gets horny fast. And I can just imagine that chat bot at Disney Plus. Like, well, I got something for you to stream. I don't know.
I know what you're really calling for.
Yeah, right. Anyway, Taryn's going to be joining us here in a second, Eric. Don't worry about that.
Oh, good.
Actually, she's right here. There's no one really watching. Hi, Taryn.
Hi.
There you go. Hi, Taryn.
Hi.
There she is.
Oh, it's bright.
Yeah, you fix all that. You should really do something about that. All right, we're let's get it started here, you guys, with a quote from Walt Disney about his little journey, his little trip down to Latin America way. Here we go.
I was asked by the government to go to South America, and kind of a cultural thing, before the those Nazi days.
Yes.
And I went down with the staff to see if I couldn't make some films about the ABC countries down there. There's Argentina, Brazil, and Chile.
Yes.
And they first wanted me to go on a handshaking goodwill tour, and I said, I don't go for it. I'm not a good handshaker and everything. And then they came back and said, well, you go down and make some films about these countries. I said, well, that's my business. I can do that.
Take a pencil in your hand.
That's right.
Why is it Willem Dafoe interviewing
him?
About
headquarters in Rio. We also went and set up a studio in the Argentine. We went over to Chile, and some of my artists, we divided a party. Some of them went up through Peru. And when we came back, I made these 4 short subjects. We brought back the Tico Tico tune was being played down there, and I brought that back and put it in. Brought back Brazil, and both of them became standard tunes here. And out of it, we developed this little Brazilian parrot, Jose Carioca, who played with Donald Duck. Anyways, these 4 films were more or less put together, and they went out in the theater. And of course, it was one of those things that they thought Disney needed a subsidy, but fortunately, that little thing went out, and it did a heck of a business, and the United States government didn't have to put up 1 nickel.
Oh, wonderful.
It was actually a goodwill tour for the government.
It does sound like Willem Dafoe.
It was later, about 2 years later, that the Three Caballeros then became the new project.
That was a follow-up, yeah.
Combining live action.
Yeah. I almost need the subsidy on that one.
I almost needed help with that one. Yeah, it does sound like Willem Dafoe, doesn't it? Wonderful.
And Walt sounds more like my grandpa than ever. Oh, well.
Oh, jeez. Oh, sure.
Back in the day.
Don't worry, everything's fine.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to that. I was like, oh, man, Willem Dafoe rules right now.
We're in a Wes Anderson film now.
Here we go.
My grandpa and Willem Dafoe having a conversation.
Wonderful. So as my friend Walt was saying, in 1941, as part of goodwill gesture, the U.S. government sent Walt Disney and 18 of his animators down to South America. I should qualify that it's not just animators. There were really like 2 real animators. There were story guys and conductors, composers, and there's a PR person. There's like a lot of other people. So it was a group of people that's not just animators.
Okay.
The point was to further solidify Pan-American relations, at least on the government side. Disney just wanted to mine the trip for content. As with most things I read about with regard to Walt, I wanted to know what the context of this trip was. And that really came about when I was researching Walt's involvement with the FBI for the most recent Patreon-only show, The Pyramid Eyes the Ears. In there, I read that Roy was the one who sent him to South America to relax. And to more importantly, get him away from the animator strike that he was completely borking. But the truth happens to be more coincidental than that. In the early 20th century, the United States periodically intervened militarily in Latin American nations to protect its interests. After the well-known Roosevelt Corollary of 1904, I don't even have to tell you guys about that.
No, not at all.
No.
Whenever the United States felt its debts were not being repaid in a prompt fashion, its citizens' business interests were being threatened, or its access to natural resources was being impeded, military intervention or threats were often used to convince the local government to see things our way. Of course, this made many Latin Americans wary of U.S. presence in their region, and hostilities grew towards the United States.
Odd.
And weird, right?
Odd behavior.
It's weird how that would happen. It's also weird how history just repeats itself.
Yeah.
Over and over
All
again.
the time.
We don't learn anything. And we, I mean people. President Wilson landed troops in Mexico in 1914, in Haiti in 1915, in the Dominican Republic in 1916, in Mexico for a second time in 1916, and then in Mexico several times additional before he left office, in Cuba in 1917, and in Panama in 1918. So have you ever wondered why we were in all these places? The early teens there that happened. Also, for most of the Wilson administration, the U.S. military occupied Nicaragua, installed a Nicaraguan president that the U.S. preferred, and ensured that the country signed treaties favorable to the U.S. I don't know. I read that and I think of that scene in Blazing Saddles where they're just, signing the governor. Where he's like, oh, do I have to sign this? Okay. And they just like guide his hand towards the pen. Like, okay. Then in 1929, President Hoover came to power. He was elected. Geez, what am I writing? And it was he who decided that it was time for a new approach to Latin America and enacted the so-called Good Neighbor Policy. Now, this government program aimed to rely on goodwill and a fair amount of new trading possibilities to repair the trust of the various South American countries the U.S. had kicked in the shins over the years, rather than continue using the military as a cudgel. This was a pretty big change from his previous belief system, which he went public with like a couple of years before being elected, that Latin American countries were just unable to govern themselves. They needed the U.S. Yeah, so it's very like racially, kind of like stinging thing. And suddenly he was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't think that. I'm going to run for president. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, so pretty big about face there. He gave an address stating that, quote, it has never been and ought not to be the policy of the United States to intervene by force to secure or maintain contracts between our citizens and foreign states or their citizens. I don't know if you can say it never has been, because
except for that time that I did say that.
Yeah, well, except the time that it happened. But I guess what he means is like policy versus like unofficial policy. Where unofficially we're gonna put a base in Nicaragua, we're gonna install governments or whatever. It's not official policy.
Yeah,
just happened.
Oopsie.
Sorry, oops, yep, it fell off the table. I don't know. Hoover's Secretary of State Henry Stimson observed in a 1931 radio broadcast that certain, quote, sore spots in inter-American affairs, quote, have damaged our good name, our credit, and our trade far beyond the apprehension of our own people. So basically, we don't even understand how much people hate us, is basically what he's saying. And stated faith in the U.S. effort to, quote, eradicate the sore spots of Latin American diplomacy. Now, the Good Neighbor Policy's main principle was that of non-intervention and non-interference in the domestic affairs of Latin America. In late 1933, the Good Neighbor Policy was confirmed as official U.S. policy. It was on the books. It's official. That's what it is. It had funding, everything. The following year, 1934, it saw the withdrawal of troops from Haiti, and new trade routes were opened over the next few years between the U.S. and Latin America. So I get some new trade going in. There's some money flowing down south. We got, hey, you guys like us, right? We're your friends.
Yeah.
Have some genes. Have some American genes, man. But more effort was needed. And I don't know how they know that, but it just was. In 1940, then President Roosevelt created the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, or the OCIAA. And appointed Nelson Rockefeller to head the organization of the Rockefeller family. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Guess how old Nelson Rockefeller was at this time?
No,
81.
20, I think he was 28.
Wow.
Or 27 or something like that.
That Rockefeller.
A little off.
Yeah. Yeah, but also you're in your late 20s and you are the head of the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. It's insane to me.
But I don't understand how a government can run using people that don't have many decades of experience behind them.
Yeah, well, you know what? You could argue that it doesn't. Either way. One division within the OCIAA, which was the Motion Picture Division. So it was this division of Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. So it's basically the arm of improving Latin American efforts, right? Or improving our standing within Latin America, right? So within that agency, there's different programs. One was Motion Picture Division. One was like arts in general or music or whatever, right? The trade, there's a lot of trade things going on, but this specifically, the Motion Picture Division is what we're focused on right here. That was headed by a man named John Hay Whitney with the main intent to abolish pre-existing stereotypes of Latin Americans that were prevalent throughout American society. Whitney was convinced of the, quote, power that Hollywood films could exert in the two-pronged campaign to win the hearts and minds of Latin Americans and to convince Americans of the benefit of Pan-American friendship. The two-pronged campaign was change the way Latin Americans were perceived in movies and TV and then send our stars down there to meet everybody. Right? A little glad handing. In order to accomplish this, Whitney urged film studios to hire Latin Americans and to produce movies that placed Latin America in a favorable light. Further, he urged filmmakers to refrain from producing movies that perpetuated negative stereotypes. Historically, Latin Americans were portrayed as lazy, backwards, and suspicious. One film star who emerged then was Carmen Miranda, used as a product to promote positive hemispheric relations. You can tell I copied this. Her films explicitly promoted the good neighbor policy. You guys, do you know Carmen Miranda? Is that name familiar?
The name is familiar. I have no idea.
She was a very famous dancer. The fruit lady with fruit on her head.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's
okay.
right. Yeah.
Got it.
U.S. ambassadors were largely ineffective at garnering favor, so prominent Hollywood figures were asked to infuse Latin American themes into their films to gain the proper sympathy down in South America. People like Orson Welles, Bob Hope, and the American Ballet Company had been going down to Latin America as part of this Good Neighbor campaign for almost a decade. But this stream of Hollywood began to do more harm than good, as most everyone there was to party, glad hand, and generally not care about the culture. So Latin Americans, I think people who have a stronger culture than the U.S., right? Because we're more of a melting pot and we're basically new. We're still babies. They're very protective of their culture. And so if you come down and you want to take their time or whatever, they want to see you as being interested in what they have to say, their history, where they're going, be interested in them, not just a place to party. And I think a lot of the Hollywood elite would go down there and do just that. And they would leave, Argentina or Brazil or, the Copacabana or whatever. And people were going like, what cares? If you don't care about us, we're not going to care about you.
Yeah.
Right. And by the spring of 1941, these ambassadors had become an active irritant in South American culture. This is a quote. The next goodwill mission that arrives in Rio, says Oswaldo Aranha, who was Brazil's foreign minister, Brazil will declare war on the United States.
Oh no. Oh dear.
Which I'm sure was very, very funny, but also like, I'm tired of this. You could read all that right there.
Yeah.
The OCIAA needed to change things up and fast. Early attempts at gaining favor in Latin America were often failures all around. For example, a film made at the time inspired by the CIAA's policy called Argentine Nights caused a riot when it opened in Argentina. Locals took offense at the Cuban-style songs and clothing featured in the film, claiming they reflected nothing of Argentine culture.
Oh, so it's just like today.
Yeah, so if you're going to make a film about our culture, get it right, or we're going to be mad.
And that's the same thing they did with Moana, and the same thing they did with Encanto.
Sure,
it's kind of like it's that history repeating itself thing.
We'll bring those up later. Remind me. There was another, perhaps secondary motive for a more friendlier approach to Latin American diplomatic relations, and that was the growing threat of fascism and the Nazi movement in Europe. In 1933, as Nazis rose to power in Germany, 10% of the German Jewish population, which is about 53,000 people, as well as about 10,000 non-Jewish Germans, fled the country for South America. By 1941, it was estimated that 500,000 Jews had managed to arrive looking for safety. and as many as 9,000 Nazi officers and collaborators from other countries escaped from Europe to find sanctuary. To find a place to hang out in South American countries. Brazil took in between 1,500 and 2,000 Nazi war criminals. This is, of course, after war, while between 500 and 1,000 settled in Chile. However, by far the largest number, as many as 5,000, relocated to Argentina. In the years after the end of the war, Argentine President Juan Perón secretly ordered diplomats and intelligence officers to establish escape routes, so-called rat lines, through ports in Spain and Italy to smuggle thousands of former SS officers and Nazi party members out of Europe into Argentina, which is wild. I mean, there's a whole arm of history that's just bizarre to me. So the U.S. is worried about this.
Please come here. Come to beautiful Argentina.
Yeah, well, and they were already actively sort of, and I can't remember if I get into this or if I read this, but it was basically at this time, South America had a bunch of resources for the building war, right? And the Axis powers were actively courting a lot of the countries in South America, and the U.S. knew that. So they wanted to come in here and just improve diplomatic relations, friendship relations, to try to counter that narrative that the Axis powers were kind of bringing in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this worry came due to the large presence of Italian and German communities in Latin America, specifically in Argentina and Brazil, even before the war. Some reports state that during the peak period of the world's overseas migration, which was between 1821 to 1932, 6 countries absorbed 90% of the total immigrants, right? And among these 6 countries, Argentina accounted for 46% of... Wait, hold on. Argentina received 6,405,000 people in a 90-year period.
Wow.
Italians accounted for 46% of the total immigration to Argentina in that 90 years. So it's a lot of those kind of like fascistic, stereotypically racist kind of viewpoints that were already starting to seed the local politics.
Wow.
Yeah. German and Italian communities also flurried across the southern and southeastern regions of Brazil. The country was also home to the largest Japanese community outside of Japan, the first group of which, consisting of 781 people, embarked aboard the Katsumaru, which sailed from Kobe on April 1908. I just think it's really neat. By the 1920s, the Japanese headed the entry lists of immigrants by nationality at Sao Paulo. So by the 1920s, more Japanese were coming through as immigrants than anywhere else.
Oh, wow.
Weird, right?
Never heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like no relevance at all, but I thought it was a neat point, which is part of my problem when I do this. Like, oh, this is cool. And suddenly I have too much background. And it's like, come on, dude.
How many of them are Nazis or Walt Disney?
Right? None, hopefully. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism also followed the Germans over and soon was ignited in Latin America, giving rise to many sympathetic Nazi groups. In 1941, on the eve of America's entry to World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to find someone to really move the needle in Latin America. So he reached out to someone who embodied the American spirit the U.S. was wanting to promote down there, Walt Disney. At first, Walt declined, stating he wasn't great with shaking hands and being a diplomat. Not to mention the studio was on strike and Walt wasn't really handling that well. It wasn't until the government came back and commissioned him to make a few cartoons about the region that Walt seemed interested, like our friend Walt was saying at the beginning. Roy encouraged Walt to take this offer, get some rest, and go out and get some content out of it. The war in Europe had cut off an entire market for the studio, and the animator strike threatened the Walt Disney Company's survival in general. Like there was a moment where nobody really knew if the studio would make it, the studio would survive. And some people are saying without this, once again, without the government stepping in and saying, hey, let's subsidize your trip, let's get you out there. He came out, he made these films, made some money, was able to pour that back in, whatever, right? Like all this kind of stuff that kept the studio going. I don't know that the studio would have made it through to when Pearl Harbor hit and the military came in and took over and whatever, right? Like I don't know that would have happened.
It like helped keep them afloat for that.
I think so,
period.
yeah. With the promise of new material and perhaps a way to get back to his roots of sketching and generating ideas, not just running a studio, Disney was on board. Even though funds were tight or non-existent, the banks took a gamble on Walt and agreed to fund the trip. Now, the U.S. government said they would reimburse Walt after the fact, so why not? Basically, as I read this, the government backed the trip saying, we will pay you later, right? And in case the films that were made didn't make money, the government would pay the bank off. So Walt goes to the bank and goes, hey, I need a loan. The bank goes, why should we do this for you? And he goes, well, because I'm Walt Disney and I do this and whatever. And they go, yeah, let's try it. You're Walt Disney. Then maybe. Because they knew that even if the films didn't make any money, the government's check would clear. Walt would pay the bank off of the note. So either way, the banks win. And it's like, okay, let's just do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least that's how I understand it.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm not smart, so I could not be right.
Hey, it makes sense.
It sounds good.
Although the contract
None of us smart.
Right. Although the contract for the
Sorry,
trip
Taryn.
itself was not signed until August 1941, Disney had already handpicked the people who would accompany him by the end of July. So pretty excited.
Yeah.
He's pretty excited to get on the road, man.
He also had a good group of people to choose from at that point.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, and international travel at the time, like that's a big deal.
Dude, it's huge. Yeah. So Disney, along with 18 of his artists, went on an extended trip to Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, and, Uruguay and all these places, right? The only question was, how would this cultural delegation and the subsequent content be received in South America? Even Carmen Miranda, the famed Brazilian who we talked about just a bit ago, was lauded by her countrymen when in 1940, she came to Rio and performed for the country's elite, like, businessmen and political leaders and whatever. She was considered more of an Americanization of their own culture rather than an example of it. So people were like upset about her. They didn't think that she was truly Brazilian. She was just sort of just American version of that.
Okay.
Huh.
So you kind of felt that Walt might have been in for a skewering at some point, either way. If you can't take Carmen Miranda dancing very well, you probably aren't going to take Goofy as a gaucho, So who were members of El Grupo? And we'll get to the name in a second, but who did Walt even bring? They were some of the most well-known artists in Walt Disney Studios at the time. First, you had Norm Ferguson, who had started out as an animator at the studio, but had been chosen to produce and direct all of the films based on the South America trip. He was a favorite of many of the children in South America because he was famous for his work on animating Pluto. So everywhere he went on this trip, he would sit down and he was asked to sketch different versions of Pluto for local children over and over and over again. I mean, this man in the movie, there's one, I think it's called South of the Border. Okay. It's on YouTube. It's basically like just a collection of these videos. It's narrated by the company. It's a company produced thing. But you see Norm just like sitting down. There's like 8 or 10 kids and he's just drawing Pluto.
Wow.
Over and over and over again. So pretty nice. I don't know that anybody would really do that these days. Another animator went along on the trip whose name was Frank Thomas, one of the famous 9 Old Men. Although, like everyone else, Frank Thomas was there to do research for the new film, Walt had an ulterior motive for asking him on the trip, supposedly. With World War II approaching, Walt was starting to worry that his animators would get drafted, at least the ones that weren't on strike. Since Frank was one of his top animators and one of the youngest, Walt figured that if he went along with them, he could avoid the draft.
Okay. I mean,
wow.
And in the movie Walt and El Grupo, so I think it was Diane Miller was like, or someone was like, you know what? I don't know that that's real. They had a tendency to over exaggerate, but you never really know, I guess. Also present on the trip was layout man Herb Ryman. He started to make cartoonish versions of all the parrots the group encountered in Rio, putting them in human clothes and poses. And from these sketches, the character of Jose Carroca was born in Three Caballeros and the parrot, the Brazilian parrot, right? Also present was the musician Charles Wolcott, who got several Academy Award nominations for the songs he wrote while on the trip. There were also storyman William Cottrell Jr., Ted Sears, and Webb Smith, and story sketch artists James Bodero and John Miller. Finally, the layout artist Lee Blair came along with his wife, Mary Blair. Now, in that Walt and El Grupo tell a story, I believe they speak with Lee and Mary's son, And he recalls the story of Lee getting tapped to come on this trip, and Mary wasn't. And Mary was pissed.
Oh.
Because she thought she deserved to go.
Absolutely.
She wanted to go.
Yeah.
So he goes, you know what? Go make your case. Go pitch it to Walt. So she put on like her best dress, got all her makeup on, all her good perfume, and went in and pitched Walt on the idea of her going. And he agreed. Kind of neat.
Good.
She's like, cool. I deserve to be here. And he's like, well, yeah, okay, great. You smell good enough. Let's go. I don't know. This trip was a particularly significant part of Mary Blair's life that basically changed the course of her career. Mary Blair and her husband eventually split off from the rest of the group and took some time to explore further in South America, like Peru, Bolivia, Guatemala, and Mexico. And as she continued to travel, she increasingly developed her bold, simplified, and colorful art style. So in this movie, again, go watch this movie. It's a fantastic movie. Mary Blair's son shows some of her watercolors before the trip, and they're just kind of standard. He's like, you put them next to my dad's, and you can't really tell them apart. The colors aren't bold. There's design. It's just everything's sort of like flat, it looked like. But she comes back from this trip, and suddenly she has palettes of colors that don't go together. That suddenly go together, and these bold shapes and these cool designs. And she really expanded her mind.
And that's the style.
That's her.
The
Mary Blair style. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. It seemed Peru really sparked her imagination, and 2 paintings she created of Peruvian children became particular favorites of Walt's, becoming the only artwork by a studio artist that he had ever hung up in his apartment.
Wow.
Supposedly. I mean, I can't prove that, but that's what it is. So not only did the timing of this trip work out well with regards to Walt getting out of the animator strike, out of negotiations of the animator strike, it offered the studio another way to solidify their relationship with film audiences in Latin America, since Germany, one of the top markets for Disney films at the time, was pretty much cut off. It also happened to correspond with the release of Fantasia in South America. So while Walt was in a few of these countries like Brazil, he would leave the group and go off to attend premieres of the movie. So you're doing triple duty, which is kind of sounds like Walt.
Yeah.
What else can I do? How else can I work on this?
Yeah.
You know, I'm basically on the hook from the government to make movies, go to my own film premiere in, tropical country. Like, why not?
Yeah.
It sounds great to me, man. The group left Miami on August 15th, 1941, and landed in Rio 3 days later, which can't be right, but maybe it is. Who knows? Like you were saying, Eric, international travel was not easy back then.
Yeah.
With Rio being Rio, the hotels were all booked up, so the group had to split up. Of course, Walt stayed at the luxurious Copacabana while he attended PR events and such, which left most of the other animators to venture out and collect stuff. This splinter group stayed at the Hotel Gloria, and in the mornings, they would have to wait in the lobby for their marching order. So Walt or someone else from the Copacabana would have to call Hotel Gloria and be like, "Hey, this is what we're doing for the day." So one of the wives of the men who went along had a background in PR, so she basically was like the PR person. And I would imagine that's her going, okay, here's the itinerary. So in this Walt and El Grupo movie, you see a lot of the timed out itineraries of what's going on for the day.
Oh.
So this group at the Hotel Gloria, they just had to go and kick it and hang out, right? And then so someone from the other hotel would call each morning what events they had to attend to, if any, or they were free to do whatever, I don't know.
Right.
So the call would come through the desk, and the bellhop would have to walk through the lobby calling for El Grupo Disney. El Grupo Disney. And the name stuck. So they liked it. So they started calling themselves El Grupo.
Okay.
Now, in Brazil, Disney and his artists took note of the cultural significance of the Brazilian parrot and studied it extensively. This research resulted in the character Jose Carioca that Herb Ryman developed, who would appear with Donald Duck and Goofy in Disney's 1942 film Saludos Amigos. In Brazil, they toured local landmarks like the giant statue of Jesus in Rio, the botanical gardens. They went to the zoos, and wherever they went, they sat and sketched and watercolored and painted and drew wild varieties of tropical plants and orchids that never have been seen before in America. At the zoo, they did animals and armadillos and all this stuff, right? They don't know. They're just drawing stuff, From city streets to giant hills, the content mill had started to spin. By the time they got to Chile, which I think was their next trip, Walt had made it clear to anybody moving forward that he only wanted to meet with fellow artists. He had enough of handshaking elected officials and doing the whole diplomat thing, which he never wanted to do in the first place. He wanted to experience the culture, which, putting all the other stuff in context of how pissed off people in Latin America were getting, like people like Orson Welles or Bing Crosby wanted to come through and just play golf. He didn't care about anything.
Yeah.
Walt's driving 2 hours away to a farm to learn how to dance. Like this is the stuff that he's into. And so people gravitated towards that, and they could feel the respect for that, and they appreciated it. And I think that really kind of made everything, blossom as well.
Right. And Walt's getting stuff out of it too. Like, this is movement. This is culture. This is something that he can bring to the Americas. This isn't just let's find animation that, that South America would find interesting. We can bring things back to North America and other markets where, like, this is a culture that a lot of people don't know a lot about at the time.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating because, like, thinking about Walt and Roy's trip to Germany in the early 30s, they just got books. Mm-hmm. They bought about like 300 books.
Right.
This was different. And I think and just putting this together now, but I think based off of that trip, Walt's like, all right, I need a storyboard artist.
Yeah.
I need a composer, because there's a ton of music we don't even know about. I need colorists. I need these people. I need a sound man.
Yeah.
To really absorb the culture. He went ready for it. It's not it's very different than just farming for stories.
Right.
Because you knew that you go buy books and whatever, but this was like, he wanted to really know, he wanted to do it justice, and he took this role very seriously.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's take a break.
Okay.
We're in Chile. We're taking a break. We're going to come back and we're going to learn a little bit more about what happened and all that kind of good stuff. So hang on, everyone. It's Ears Up. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. In breaking news, leading scientists worldwide are conducting experiments to determine if Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the perfect combination of peanut butter and chocolate. However, it appears the study was inconclusive, as the scientists couldn't help but eat all the Reese's. Because when you want something sweet, you can't do better than Reese's. Find Reese's now at a store near you.
And now, back to the show that ignites your dream wish of imaginations and magical color wonderment of forever. Ears Up.
All right, thanks for sticking around, everybody. I'm going to go and grab me a Brew Free or Die Cold IPA from 21st Amendment. Yeah, which I should play their commercial later, but texted Sully the other day because, Greek Easter was this last Sunday. Eric, I don't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't know it was Greaster. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's fine. I felt you heathens mocking us. It was also Cinco de Mayo, but whatever. And so
I was at a different church going, think of all those people that think it's Easter today.
I texted Sully. I was buying some beer and I saw that they have 2NA has a variety pack. They do a lot of variety packs. And I never really look at them because they're usually beers that I don't want to drink, just from any brewery, because it's a lot of IPAs, a lot of stuff I'm not interested in.
Sure.
But I saw in this variety pack specifically, there was a pale ale in it. And I'm like, oh, you bitch. Because that's how you get me.
Yeah.
A pale ale or a lager. And I was like, okay. So I look closely.
Oh, God, I thought that was the full can.
No. Dottie, go away, dude. Nobody likes you. I look, there's the cold IPA, which is pretty good. For an IPA, it's pretty good. There's the Back in Black, which is a black IPA, which I do like. It's one of the few black IPAs I'll drink. Mm-hmm. And then this pale ale and then like another IPA. I was like, I had to buy it. So I texted him. I was like, you got me. You finally got me with a friggin' variety pack. He goes, you're welcome.
To get three pills.
To get three pale ales.
Pale ales.
But that's all right. I'll drink it because everything else is good. Anyway. All right. Where were we? Chile. All right. So what the group would do whenever they went into a hotel in a new country, they would set up shop. They would post up in hotel lobbies, poring over materials, musical instruments of the region that they would go out and gather. And they would stay there for like 4 or 5 days. So they would really get entrenched with everything. And of course, they would be giving interviews to the press whenever they could. In Buenos Aires, they took over the penthouse of the hotel they were staying at, and they constructed their makeshift studio where they would assemble the basic artwork, stories, and music that would come together once they arrived back home. In Argentina, dancing expositions were given on the roof of the hotel the group was staying at, and as artists sketched the dancers and the musicians of the group did their best to transcribe the notes they were hearing into sheet music. Now, these were traditional dances and songs, and these new rhythms would add that bit of authenticity and flair to these future projects that Walt had in mind. Now, in Walt and El Grupo, you see footage of this. And so this, specifically at this hotel in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, it's like the garden patio off of the penthouse. So the penthouse, there was this big, long, basically like a tiny ballroom that they would use it. They would use it literally for ballroom in like the colder months.
Okay.
But then they would rent it out for like a penthouse or whatever. So it's not really like a traditional suite. But it's just like a rectangular room. And then, there's no couches, but it's like dining room or whatever. Anyway.
Okay.
And then you open these double doors in this movie, you see it and it's still there or whatever. And you get a tour of it. It's neat. And there's this garden loft patio. And then it transitions to all of this footage. It's like, feels like 5 or 10 minutes of all this Super 8 film of Walt and all of these people just getting these dances. And the people actually interview one of the guys who taught Walt these dances. He's really old. He's in his 80s or whatever. It's kind of neat that they tracked him down. And apparently this guy had gone out and he was collecting all of these really old, authentic, little known dances that have been basically just passed, like in America with like Native American dances would be the only thing I could really contribute that to or compare that to, or it's just passed down orally throughout generations. So he went out and learned all of these.
Oh, wow.
And so he happened to move to Buenos Aires and Walt somehow knew that he was there, or whatever, they connected. And so this guy was like teaching Walt all these like cool traditional Argentinian moves. Cool. It's really neat. Oh, wow. And so you see a bunch of footage about that.
Wow.
You see Walt doing it. You see all these people dancing and they're just really kind of getting down. And it's cool. It's funky. It's wild for a number of reasons. And I can't help but look at it a bit like some sort of weird conquistador sort of flashback into the past where instead of gold, the visitors are mining for vibes. But you watch these people on both sides of the groups, right? The natives, you know what I mean? The native peoples and Walt's group. And the joy that is shared here is very, very palpable. When artists get together, it's about sharing the love of the thing, whatever it is, be it music or art or whatever. And politics and language, to a certain extent, kind of disappear, only to reappear when haters like me tried to find a narrative to not like something. But I'm trying to think if I talk about this. Yes, I did talk about this later. The other thing that struck me while watching this is all of these men are in wool suits constantly.
That sounds terrible.
In the sun. In South America, in the summer.
Not good.
No, not good. And I mean full on 3-piece numbers, ties, loafers, like high button collar, tie pin.
Not good.
Just no air circulation at all.
They must have been so smelly.
That's exactly my first thought is the BO.
Awful.
Especially like in the penthouse where they're all getting together and you see the footage and they're standing over each other and this looks good and where you gotta stink like crazy. I just can't imagine.
BO and cigarettes.
Oh my God, dude.
Well, the cigarettes help. Yeah. Like how many suits do you think they brought? Like 2?
They had to have brought 4 or 5.
Okay.
And then one of these things, people were like, they usually had people on like the hotel floors that would press our suits every day, which is great for them. But like something about like staying in fresh linen shirts 5 days a week is very hard on your laundry. It's really hard to do. Yeah. So I don't know, man. And there's one of like these color photographs and you could see the wool texture in this man's pants and he's sitting out in the sun, just sketching people. And God, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another thing that strikes you as you watch Walt and El Grupo is the lack of a decent amount of interpreters. The dancers, the artists, what have you, they didn't really speak English, and members of El Grupo didn't speak Portuguese or even Spanish, which is very closely related, or anything. So you have these two factions of people that had to find a way to communicate. which is another way that art plays into culture, right? You have two groups of artists sharing information without the complication of lengthy explanations or words taken out of context. It's just pure expression of passion in the moment and the joy of sharing each other's cultures. It's really neat to see. Like it's really, you can really, it's very obvious. The film was done really well in that regard. At one stop in Uruguay, the city schools were closed in honor of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. The children of the town greeted El Grupo with songs, cheers, and flowers. Now, Walt said he could only stay for this particular group for about 10 minutes, and then he had to get going. But he didn't realize how many kids were going to be there. He thought it was going to be like 10 or 15. There were hundreds of children. He ended up visiting for about an hour.
Oh.
Kind of neat. This is at this time. Remember, this is the most famous
Walt.
man in the world.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to watch this stuff. It's going to be great.
Wow.
It was here in Argentina, in Uruguay, really, where Elias Disney had passed away. Walt's dad passed away while he was on this trip.
Okay.
Walt decided to stay on the journey, preferring to work through his grief, I imagine. I mean, he took his role of artistic ambassador very, very seriously and felt bad about possibly pulling out of the trip. Plus, arranging airfare home on such short notice was not as easy as it is today and would have probably seen him missing the funeral anyway. So he thought long and hard about it, and he decided, I'm just going to stay on and do my thing and stiff upper lip kind of thing. Now, Walt's trip was actually having the intended effect on local politics that the U.S. wanted. At the time, the Nazi governments, as well as the U.S., were courting Latin America, seeing it as a strategic location for future world plans. In Brazil, for example, the president was both siding quite well, so it was important that the U.S. get on the good foot. When El Grupo hit Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, a banner was strung up welcoming Walt, and then underneath that was a call for the German chancellor to go home.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
No explanation, but that's what it is, and that's what happened. It's like, okay, I think you can chalk that one up to, word is traveling ahead of the group and how cool everybody is. And I mean, there's full page spreads. There's 500 people meeting at the airport, blah, 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 blah.
Huh.
So kind of neat. After Argentina, El Grupo split up to cover other countries, including Bolivia and Peru, before reuniting in Santiago, Chile on September 29th. Crossing the Andes Mountains in a plane required passengers to basically breathe from a tube connected to the oxygen tank in the plane. It's like a small plane, right? Flying at 18,000 feet, the air is thin, and there's footage in this in the south of the border. I'll get the name in a second. But it's not in Walt and El Grupo, but it's in this other one of Mary Blair just snorting O2 from a hose as the plane barrels over the mountains. Just, like everyone just has a tube and she's going,
my God. That's so weird.
But there's no mask or anything. It's just she's holding a tube like a cigarette. It's great.
Weird.
Yeah. And then finally on October 4th, they boarded the ship, the Santa Clara, and they sailed for home. And what's really neat about their trip is that, of course, everywhere they went, they would draw popular Disney characters for the local children. It's just very sweet. And by all accounts, Walt and El Grupo were just a tornado of welcoming energy wherever they went. They would go sketching during the day and then partying all night, sometimes quite literally. Walt and his team were always available to the press and seemed to always be smiling and welcoming. And the locals would love showering Walt and his team with attention. Even the journalists covering the trek seemed drawn to Walt, no pun intended. And in fact, when news of his father's passing hit the wires while Walt was still in Uruguay, I believe, the journalists who had met with Walt over the last 2 days visited him at the hotel he was staying at to offer their condolences and to sit and grieve alongside him.
Oh.
It's a very emotional showing. So they interviewed one of the guys, one of the journalists who was there, and he was like, all of us got together and we talked about it. And we said, this man has shown us so much, has been so kind and so open with us. And we just instantly felt connected to him. We thought as a group, we needed to go down and do this. We needed to go pay our respects. And you can tell he was very touched by that.
Wow.
Very neat.
Well, yeah. And this is, I mean, like Walt felt immense guilt about this, not just because he wasn't there for the funeral, right? Like this was, if I recall from your episode that you did for the Pyramid, the Eye and the Ears, like he felt responsible for his parents' death because he bought them the house that they died in.
Well, his mom died first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he felt responsible for that for sure. And that was part of.
She was the one who died in the
She
house.
was the one who died. Yeah. And then he kind of held on to that because he hired people from the studio to go fix the furnace. And there was a gas leak and then she passed away. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
she passed and then Elias passed much later. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot to hold on to, though.
It's a lot to hold on to, which is some people are like, that's probably why he was such a jerk about the strike. Because he was sort of taking it out. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Who can say?
Wow.
In the film Walt and El Grupo, many of the wives and children of the group read letters sent home from this trip. And you can tell the men absolutely loved the culture they interacted with down there. We can look back at this time and go, oh, Walt was just there to siphon content and it's all a job. But that would do a great disservice to what really happened. The fact is that El Grupo discovered a whole new way of life. They were constantly being surprised by Brazil, specifically, and Latin America in general, and wrote about it in great detail back to their family at home. I suppose it helped that these people were artists, composers, storytellers, colorists, so they are more tuned up for an excursion like this. But the way these men tell it, they were totally swept up in the samba rhythms, the nightlife, and the vibrancy of the areas they went to. The Goodwill trip yielded suitcases of material and made hundreds and hundreds of children happy in doing so. But of course, it was not without its critics. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
Now, I think I might have this out of order. Hold on a second, everybody. Yeah, I have it out of order. They come home from the trip.
Okay.
They assemble all their content. They put it all together. They choose the 4 shorts that they were going to release together as a package for Saludos Amigos, right? And all along the way, they're like creating characters. Some characters got cut, but they ended up solidifying the 4 characters. They solidified the 4 stories, all the music. They got everything together. And they put it together and it was like 40 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. It was not enough. It was too short to qualify as a feature-length film. So they had to figure out how to add footage to reach that necessary 40-minute mark and, whatever. Luckily, a solution was found in the form of all of the 16-millimeter home footage that was taken by Walt and others during the trip. I thought it was 8mm, but who cares? What's a millimeter or two here and there? You know what I mean? Walt was admittedly reluctant to add his own footage into the film as he felt he was a horrible cinematographer and that his hands often shook the camera. Yet he determined it was necessary in order to release the film, so they took the best parts of the footage and used it as a way to transition from each short and each country represented in Saludos Amigos. There was also some buzz about the U.S. government having complained that each cartoon would only be valid in the country at hand, and they wanted Walt to solve this issue, which he did. He sort of used the real footage of them traveling around to tell the story to make it a little more interesting, where it's not like, oh, I'm only Brazilian, so I don't really care about what happens in the Andes Mountains. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In an attempt to make Saludos Amigos as inclusive of multiple Latin American countries as possible, Disney Studios actively chose to have Donald Duck visit Lake Titicaca, which is on the Peruvian-Bolivian border, and claim that he was visiting the, quote, land of the Incas, rather than any particular country. And of course, this upset more than a few people who felt slighted at the combining of cultures into a melting pot, rather than each standing on their own, the way Brazil did with the Jose Carioca thing. So that brings us back to Moana, where even though you can get people from the different Polynesian cultures together, you're making a film about just broad strokes, but you're making it based on the fact that you want better relations with these people in Latin America, but you focus on Brazil in one and then just general everybody else in the other.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard, I guess.
It is, yeah.
Bolivia and Peru are represented by Lake Titicaca, Chile by an airplane, and Argentina by Goofy in the role of a gaucho, which is a South American cowboy, basically.
Oh, okay.
A fully developed character, one that would outlive the film's original production, which is Jose Carioca, on the other hand, portrays Brazil. So there's the slight, right?
Okay.
You gave a brand new character to Brazil, but we have an airplane for Chile? Like, really? Who just delivers mail in the movie. Like, it's all he does. He like fights the weather and delivers mail. It's like, yay!
Yeah.
Great. Fine. In the next movie, they got a rooster from Mexico. Panchito Pistoles.
Again, a new character. This special attention given to Brazil also had slight political ramifications because retaining Brazil as an ally would sort of counter Argentina's Germanic political leanings, to say the least. Any move by the United States to help Argentina was viewed with deep suspicion by the government in Brazil, which assumed that American aid to the Argentines was detrimental to Brazilian interests. So there's a lot of infighting going on, and there's a lot of politics at play. Needless to say, the Argentine government harbored the same assumptions about the Brazilian interests. Thus, giving preferential treatment to Brazil was in the United States government's and Disney's best interest. So I wonder if that was why Brazil got the good stuff.
Oh,
because that was more top of mind to the government and what we needed out of these Latin American tours.
Okay,
all this goodwill.
So a little, yeah. Okay,
yeah. By the way, we talked about the age of Nelson Rockefeller. How old do you think Walt Disney was when they embarked on this trip?
35?
39.
Ooh.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Can you imagine me 7 years ago touring Latin America with 18 of my closest friends and you? It'd be crazy.
Not even your friends, but like people who work for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wild.
Your closest employees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now let's get to the film. Saludos Amigos, which is Spanish for greetings, friends, is a 1942 American live-action animated propaganda anthology film. This is from Wikipedia. It was set in Latin America. It's made up of 4 different segments. Donald Duck stars in 2 of them and Goofy in 1. It also features the first appearance of Jose Carioca, the Brazilian cigar-smoking parrot. Saludos Amigos premiered in Rio de Janeiro on August 24th, 1942. It was released in the United States on February 6th, 1943. That's a long difference there.
Mm-hmm.
It was theatrically reissued in 1949 when it was shown on a double bill with the first reissue of Dumbo. Thought it was interesting. The film's original score was composed by Edward H. Plum, Paul J. Smith, and Charles Wolcott, who went on the trip. The title song, Saludos Amigos, was written for the film by Charles Wolcott and Ned Washington. The film also featured the song Aquarela do Brasil, written by the popular Brazilian songwriter Ari Barroso, and performed by Aliso de Oliveira, and an instrumental version of Tico Tico no Fuba, written by Zaquina de Abreu. So Walt talked about Tico Tico in the interview I played in the beginning. He's like, we brought that Tico Tico number. Here's what this is. That's right. Very jazzy.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Where did I leave off? Okay. So Aquarela de Brasil was written and first performed in 1939, but did not achieve much initial success. However, after appearing in this film, Saludos Amigos, it became an international hit, becoming the first Brazilian song to be played over 1 million times on American radio. So here's a little bit of that.
Brasil, é o Brasil brasileiro, é o mulato insoneiro, vou cantar-te nos meus versos. O Brasil samba que dá bamboleio, que faz ginga. O Brasil do meu amor, terra de Nosso Senhor. Brasil, Brasil, pra mim, pra mim. Oh, esse coqueiro que dá coco, oi onde amarro a minha rede.
Catchy.
That's fun. Yeah.
It was nominated for Academy Award in 1944 for Best Scoring of a Musical Picture, Best Original Score in the title song, Saludos Amigos, of course, and Best Sound Recording. And I think I do have Saludos Amigos. Wait, not Saludos Amigos. Hold on a second. I got ahead of myself. Yeah, Saludos Amigos. I get that and Three Caballeros mixed up. Here's Saludos Amigos. title song.
Amigos, a fond greeting to you. A warm handshake or two. Good friends always do.
That Disney sound.
Amigos, a new day's waiting to start. You must meet it, wake up and greet it with a gay song in your heart.
I texted Jeremy. I was like, dude, there's so much musical history in this trip, in these two films. You gotta do something about it. And he hasn't responded. Let's see. And so got nominated for a bunch of stuff and Best Sound Recording. But over at the National Board of Review Awards, this movie won for Best Documentary. Film historian Alfred Charles Richard Jr. has commented that Saludos Amigos, quote, did more to cement a community of interest between peoples of the Americas in a few months than the State Department had in 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a reception. So 2 years after, there was a second film that was that had resulted from this trip, The Three Caballeros, released in 1944. Premiered in Mexico City on December 21st, 1944, was released in the U.S. on February 3rd, 1945, and in the U.K. in March of 1945. The film stars Donald Duck, who in the course of the film is joined by his old friend, Jose Coroca, who represents Brazil, and later becomes friends with a pistol-packing rooster named Panchito Pistoles, who represents Mexico. The finale with the words, "The End," exploding from the fireworks, first in Spanish, in the colors of the flag of Mexico, then the second in Portuguese, in the colors of the flag of Brazil, and finally in English, in the colors of the flag of the United States. Can you be obvious about it? You know, it was released
What's the difference? What's the end in Spanish and Portuguese?
Spanish is fin, and this Portuguese is fim.
Oh,
with an M. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, whatever. The Three Caballeros was re-released to theaters April 15th, 1977. But for this reissue, the film was edited significantly and re-released in a featurette form at 41 minutes to accompany a reissue of Never a Dull Moment. Because I guess of the smoking. They edited some of the smoking out.
Oh, okay.
For the film's television premiere. Now, I didn't know that Saludos Amigos was on TV, but Three Caballeros was. It was aired as the 9th episode of the first season of ABC's Disneyland television series. It was edited, shortened, and retitled A Present for Donald for December 22nd, 1954, broadcast and subsequent reruns. Because in the movie, he's like opening gifts, 3 gifts, and each one he's like, whatever.
Okay.
Donald receives gifts from his friends for Christmas instead of for his birthday as in the original movie. In April 2007, the film became the basis for a ride at the Mexican Pavilion at Walt Disney World's Epcot named Grand Fiesta Tour, starring the Three Caballeros. The 2011 Mickey's Soundsational Parade at Disneyland features all 3 Caballeros and the Arakan bird in one parade unit, which is a whole character in the thing. Along with many other Disney characters, Panchito, Jose, and Donald appear in the updated It's a Small World ride at Disneyland during the section portraying Mexico. The film was nominated for an Academy Award in 1946 for Best Scoring of a Musical Picture and Best Sound Recording. So a lot of these were nominated, but they never won, so whatever. In addition to the 2 feature films produced from this trip, Disney Studios produced several health and public safety shorts that were meant to be distributed through Latin American countries. Oh, before I get to that, I wanted to point out. So, you know, we're listening to, here's like, you know, Brazil, right? Like, or Brazil, I forget the name. Aquilera do Brazil. Okay. And you watch this movie, and the way that the animators are dancing, they are into it. And the way that they write home, they're like, it's like they catch a wave and they can't get it out. And they're like, every time I hear this soundbite, I have to dance. It's like a thing.
That's so cool.
This is like the music, right? Okay. Very sweeping, but also kind of a thumping rhythm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I did is I looked up. Actually, here's the Three Caballeros theme song. I forgot to play this too.
Now we're 3 gay caballeros.
Okay, hold on a second.
We're three gay caballeros. They say we are birds of a feather.
So you kind of hear that like thumping rhythm. That's kind of like the Aikido de Brazil, right? It's like,
where he goes, they want to always together.
Anyway. Okay, so what I did is I just looked up what was on the Billboard #1 charts in 1941, and I just picked 3 at random.
Okay.
And here they are. And tell me how soon you fall asleep.
Now we're 3.
Nope.
Hey, Daddy.
Oh.
I want a diamond ring, bracelets, everything. Daddy,
this is Sammy Kaye with his song
you
Daddy.
want to get the best from me. Hey.
But we don't talk about that. My sister and I recall
This is Jimmy Dorsey with My Sister and I.
fishing schooners pulling into shore.
Just bored city, dude.
Jimmy singing about schooners and his sister.
Yeah. And this is another Jimmy Dorsey tune called Blue Champagne. That's it. Those were 3 of the top songs at the time when these people were leaving to go to Brazil. Now you go from that to even just the intro to Aikido de Brazil. Just the trill and the bounce of the voice is like enough to be like, oh, this is, it catches you. I'm not gonna play it because I'm bored with it, but like you can see the infectious nature of their trip.
Yes.
And you can see you can understand it coming from like, culturally, coming from big band and whatever to this beat.
It gave them life.
It really did. I can't blame them. Can't blame them for it. So yes, they did a series of short cartoons entitled Health for the Americas. And it featured Disney-esque takes on public health hazards represented in cartoon shorts. The main character was Careless Charlie, who did everything wrong, but eventually, learned how to exist and not kill himself by being a disgusting pig. Basically, he was
Charlie.
Yeah, I know. He was like goblin mode maxing. So these films include a film called Cleanliness Brings Health, 1944, which is the difference between 2 families, the clean family that cares for their food and home, and they remain happy, and the careless family that lives in filth and are unhealthy. I know. Defense Against Invasion, which is the human body is compared to a city, and the film shows how the city or the body would react should it be invaded by germs. You have Environmental Sanitation, which is an educational film about the growth of a city and the need to build proper water and sanitation systems for a growing populace. You have a movie on hookworm. You have a movie on how disease travels, the human body, infant care, which I feel like, I don't know, it's a little rude. We made a movie about how you should care for your kids, the things you've been doing for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Planning for good eating, tuberculosis, water, friend or enemy, which is how to prevent contamination of the water supply.
Okay.
What is disease? The unseen enemy. And the Winged Scourge, which is the 7 dwarves fighting malaria.
I mean, if you have to teach people about diseases and water cleanliness, it makes sense that you might need to tell them, babies, don't drop. No swingy.
Shake sometimes. You know what you shouldn't shake?
Bro, never.
Summer is just around the corner, and our friends at the 21st Amendment Brewery are welcoming the warmer weather with open arms and a refreshing favorite, Hell or High Watermelon Wheat. Picture this: a sunny day, the smell of barbecue in the air, and a cold, crisp Hell or High Watermelon in your hand. It's the ultimate summertime companion, perfect for those unforgettable gatherings with friends and family. But what makes Hell or High Watermelon so special? It's not just its bright straw color or tight white bubbles. No, it's the subtle blend of wheat beer with a hint of sweet biscuit and a kiss of juicy watermelon that sets it apart from the rest. With its refreshing flavor and delightful light fruit notes, Hell or High Watermelon is bound to become your go-to summer beer. And at just 4.9% ABV, you can enjoy it all day long without missing a beat. So when you're looking for that perfect beverage to complement those sunny days and backyard barbecues, look no further than Hell or High Watermelon Wheat. Find it wherever great craft beer is sold and make this summer one to remember.
Thank you, me. I'm welcome.
Very good.
Now, despite the group's extensive data mining trip to the region, some of these films didn't hit right with the population, of course, due to a few cultural translation errors. For example, in Water, Friend or Enemy, which I prefer the latter, really, the color of the water is red. To Americans, this means danger or death, right? Like, don't drink this. Don't drink the water.
Exactly.
Right? Dave Matthews song?
Of course.
But to the residents in Latin America, red means life and joy. The water, to convey danger or death, should have been black.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Stuff like that. If you're like, I don't understand. These two men. So here we get to like the critiques of what of the trip meant, right? Lerner and Ortiz Torres, who are two visual arts professors at UC San Diego, first delved into Disney's influence within Latin American culture in their 1995 movie Frontierland, Frontierlandia. More art film than documentary, the film examines Disney's impact and that kind of the way that the cultural representation of Disney sort of infiltrated the art world of Latin America and sort of influenced it, that way. It's a pretty cool. I haven't seen the whole film. There's like an 8-minute trailer of it. It's pretty neat. If you like art films,
okay,
pretty neat. When Saludos Amigos debuted in Mexico, the opening credits read, "Greetings from America. The time has come to become good friends. Greetings, friends and neighbors. We must now come together as one." I'm sure this is in Portuguese, so it makes much more sense.
Yes.
The U.S. version of the film sort of left this part out at the beginning, which further led critics to accuse Disney of simply making propaganda for the U.S. government, which you could argue, one way or the other, really. The song, at least in Spanish and Portuguese versions, Saludos Amigos, explicitly appeals to Latin American nations to enlist in the American war effort, but not in our versions, which is odd. That's an odd thing. Another criticism of the film was the blending of cultures that El Grupo had encountered during their trip and sort of boiling down the region into mere generalizations of Latin American life. This is a quote from somewhere. I apologize, forget where I got it from. They say, "By selecting the most superficial and singular traits of each people in order to differentiate them and using folklore as a means to divide and conquer nations occupying the same dependent position, our Latin American countries become trash cans, being consistently repainted for the voyeuristic and orgiastic pleasures of the metropolitan nations," which I feel like is very heady stuff.
Yeah.
But it also makes kind of sense. I mean, if that's what you're culturally like tuned to is your art, and then you get Walt Disney coming down, you're like, oh, this is tight. Cool. And then he makes a movie about, an airplane. And you're like, how is that Chilean at all?
Right.
Because he's in the mountains. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. I'm kidding.
I was like, that was an ending.
I'm joking. And there's more examinations of that sort of cultural cross-pollination in the controversial classic How to Read Donald Duck, which was first published in Chile in 1971. And this is not my phrase, but I took this from a book description because I don't run in these like philosophically political world. Looking at popular culture through a Marxist post-colonial lens, Ariel Dorfman and Armand Matelart critique Disney comics as vehicles for American imperialism. I don't know what a Marxist post-colonial lens is.
Yeah.
But it sounds weird. It sounds not good. It sounds bad.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a quote from one of the pages in that book, the How to Read Donald Duck. "Here lies Disney's inventive product of his era, rejecting the crude and explicit scheme of adventure strips that came up at the same time. The ideological background is without any doubt the same, but Disney, not showing any open repressive force, is much more dangerous. The division between Bruce Wayne and Batman is the projection of fantasy outside the ordinary world to save it. Disney colonizes the everyday world, at hand of ordinary man and his common problems, with the anachronistic of a child's imagination." I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I'm too dense.
Yeah, that
or
went
this is
over
too-
my head.
Yeah, it's very heady, but I guess I include this because not everyone was really excited about it. But also, this is all of the things that I read about that were critiquing it were 20 or 30 years after the fact, which I feel like is very easy to look back and say that.
I was really hoping How to Read Donald Duck would be more about how to recreate Clarence Nash's voice, which
that would be How to Read Like Donald Duck.
Oh, How to Read Like Donald Duck.
Yeah.
Okay, page one.
Yeah.
Okay, get that out of the way. That was bad.
Yeah. Outside Chile, How to Read Donald Duck became the most widely printed political text in Latin America for some time, where the entire third printing was dumped into the ocean by the Chilean Navy, and bonfires were held to destroy earlier editions.
Oh boy.
In fact, it was just re-released in like 2018 with like a new intro by the authors and stuff like that. So it's a like a really viable political text.
Okay.
I just don't understand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
During the Second World War, the good neighbor policy took on extra meaning. After Pearl Harbor, almost all Southern Hemisphere nations declared war on Japan and Germany out of solidarity with the U.S. We were not only partners within our southern borders, but since they had resources we needed, such as rubber, the good feelings benefited everyone. The era of the good neighbor policy ended with the ramp-up of the Cold War in 1945, as the United States felt that there was a greater need to protect the Western Hemisphere from the Soviet influence now that the Nazi influence was wiped out. The changes conflicted with the good neighbor policy's stated goal of using trade and goodwill only, and kind of somehow accidentally led to a new wave of U.S. involvement in Latin American affairs, which is the thing we worked really hard at not doing. Until the end of the Cold War, the United States directly or indirectly attacked all suspected socialist or communist movements in the hope of ending the spread of the Soviet influence. U.S. interventions and interference in this era included the CIA overthrow of Guatemala's president in 1954, the unsuccessful CIA-backed Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba in 1961, support for the 1964 Brazilian coup d'etat, which helped remove the democratically elected president from power, the occupation of the Dominican Republic in response to the Dominican Civil War in 1955-56, or 65-66, the CIA subversion of the Chilean president in 1970, and support for the 1973 coup d'etat that removed him, and support for Operation Charlie in Central America and Operation Condor in South America, and the CIA subversion of Nicaragua's Sandinista government from about 1981 to 1990. So after World War II, the Organization of American States was established in 1949. However, the U.S. began to shift its focus to aid and rebuilding efforts in Europe and Japan. These efforts largely neglected Latin American countries. So in the late 1950s, the U.S. strengthened relations with Latin America, again, launching the Inter-American Development Bank and later the Alliance for Progress. So we kind of went back and forth. We dipped back in and out, but we definitely sort of threw the good neighbor policy out the door. And there's a bunch of stuff about like, I lost it, but one of the wars, I think it was in El Salvador between 1981 and 1990. The U.S. gave the Salvadorian military an estimated $1 million a day in order to defeat what it regarded as a communist uprising. According to the UN Truth Commission, the new infantry battalions financed by U.S. aid became the main perpetrators of war crimes. So that's fun. The current president of Honduras had further militarized the police force when whatever, I'm not going to get into this. It's a whole stupid thing. Basically, I'm like going like, because we failed. The gist is because we failed at our good neighbor policy, because we abandoned it for what we thought was a bigger threat. You can sort of say, well, the good neighbor policy maybe just didn't even mean anything because you're only good neighbors when it suits you. And then now it doesn't suit you. Now the war's over. The Nazi threat is gone. Now we're going to do something else. But, the fascist threat is here. The Soviet threat is here. So let's go back in, but let's be harder about it. And it sort of culminates and basically you can trace it to what's happening right now, like our southern borders.
Okay.
Where there's a lot of people from El Salvador and Honduras and a lot of Latin American countries still coming in because a lot of the military and a lot of the government that was installed in the 80s from us is kind of either we trained them or now they're there because of us. Like a lot of these problems can be traced back to our abandonment of these policies.
Okay.
Which I find really interesting, not because like I want to get political about it, because but I think it all does tie in with the formation of the good neighbor policy. And it was a good idea. And Walt sort of was the high watermark of what it could have been, or what it was, I guess, right? Like, he left on a high note. Everyone loved him. I couldn't find any negative press about him at all. There was some newspaper articles from fascists and whatever saying, go away or whatever. I couldn't really find them. And from all accounts, it was sort of just white noise. Nobody really paid much attention to it.
Okay.
Right. Everybody was talking about Walt. Like, Bing Crosby was down there at the time, and people were like, there's a 1 page on Bing Crosby. Here's 7 pages on Walt. Like, it's just, it's nothing. No one cares.
Yeah.
He was the biggest star, and he was the nicest. He was the best of the U.S. that we had to send down. Clearly.
Yeah.
If he wasn't, he wouldn't need to come down, kind of thing, right? He was like our last resort. And we sort of abandoned that. And then the next time they see us, we're overthrowing their like legal elections because we don't like how it came out. And that's not okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's weird.
Yeah.
So South of the Border with Disney is the film about the trip. It's like in 2 parts, 16 minutes a piece. They're all over YouTube. You can find them. They're not like official Disney. It's not on the official Disney like YouTube channel. I don't know why.
Okay.
But they're there. It's all footage shot on the thing. It's narrated. There's a couple Disney gags in there that are like pre-planned, it's set up, but great footage, really cool stuff. If you are into this history about the animators and about kind of how they were off the cuff, watch this movie, South of the Border with Disney. Go on YouTube and get it. Paired with Walt and El Grupo, you'll have all the relaxed Walt Disney you can handle. I mean, the man's on the beach. He's shooting stuff. He's dancing. He's barbecuing. He's on a horse. They dress him up in the clothes. He had a great time. So yeah, so that's it. That is Disney's time in South America. He basically went down there as a goodwill ambassador, mined all the content, made a couple great movies and a bunch of shorts that are weird, but watch those too. Go check them out. I've named them all. They're weird. They're weird, but they're like sort of relevant still today. And it would be kind of neat to watch these in class.
Yeah.
Because they're very much that, oh no, you can't do that. This is what a microscope is. If you take your glasses, it's like a whole thing. But, it's cute.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did an excellent job. That sounded like a very tough topic. Just because it's so, I guess what we do is histories, but like that was like American world history, not Disney history.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. Like it was hard for me because I feel like there is a lot of context.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not important to him being there or what he did, but it's important to why he was there.
Yeah.
Because if we weren't trying to be, good neighbors, he would never have gone down there.
Right.
And aside from the 2 movies and all the shorts, like Mary Blair, Small World wouldn't look the way it looks now.
Yeah, which is
whole
wild.
Thing, right.
That's like my favorite part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So cool.
It changed her career fundamentally. And in Walt and El Grupo, again on Disney Plus, I suggest you watch it. A lot of these animators, a lot of these people that went on, it changed their path for the better. It enabled Alice in Wonderland. And some of the other movies after were directly reflected on the group's time. And Mary Blair, it's a very, very huge thing. It's a lot of touch points throughout the rest of the career of the studio. And so, Walt said in the beginning of the interview that I played, like it made so much money that they were able to not have the subsidy from the government.
Oh yeah! Wow! Yeah. Cool.
Saludos Amigos made enough money. We're like, okay, we don't need the repayment. I appreciate it, but we don't need it.
Cool.
Which who does that?
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like, who does that? You would never, they're talk about all the money that Snow White made, Walt just dumped back into expansion. He dumped it back into the thing. But nowadays, companies won't do that. They'll raise your prices. So everyone still makes the same amount of money at the top, but they'll raise the prices to then do the expansion, to do the thing. They won't. Nobody uses profits anymore. It's a PG&E, our power company's been doing for us for years.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we need to bury the power line. So we're going to raise your prices. So you pay for the fact that we haven't done this yet. But I'm not, as a CEO, I'm not going to take a price cut.
No, of course not.
No.
Why would you?
Yeah, we're not going to use our $4 billion profits. We're not going to use our profits. No. You're going to pay for it.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we'll lower the prices. We don't know yet. It's kind of neat. The more I learn about Walt, the more, like I said at the beginning, the more I want to put everything in context.
Yeah.
And I kind of know. It's fun for me.
Cool.
Hopefully it's fun for you.
It was good. Very good. Well done.
I don't know. I don't like it.
Well, that's because it's something that you did.
I might change it. I might go back and
What do you mean change it?
I don't know. I'll re-record pieces.
I really don't think you should do that. You don't need to. Great.
I kind of want to play more of the Brazilian music they found, but I think
that whole idea, just that, I mean, that's big that the Brazilian, they found this style of music that was so exciting to them. That's really interesting, but
yeah, I think so too.
I think they all came back. You portrayed it well that they all came back with something.
Well,
and some of them, I'm sure some of them came back with more than they bargained for.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I mean, like, I think it was only two couples. I think there's only two or three women, maybe, because Lily was there, and obviously Mary Blair was there, and then another gentleman's wife was there, and I think for the most part, and there's like 12 just men just hanging out. You for weeks and weeks. Freaky things happen.
Yeah.
You got it. Oh, and then the best part about it, in Walt and El Grupo. So they were partying at this club, the Orca, and I want to say it was in Rio, and there was like footage of it, and it very crazy. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And they would talk a lot about Rio and about the nightlife and about how they would stay up all night. And this one of the people like, I don't know where I get the energy from, but I hear the samba and I just go. Like I can't help it. And filmmakers find the Orca. It's in ruins, and you can see the shot. Like they go into the building. And you can see it now, and it just obviously looks very different. It's just neat. It's very neat to come back to those places. They did a great job at it.
Nice.
Yeah, they did a good job. But yeah, some of the music, let's check it out real fast. I mean, why not? What else are we going to do? Go home? Stop talking?
Yeah, I'm surprised that you want to keep talking.
Well, you know what it is? I feel like I haven't done enough.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yeah.
This is like a Supreme Resort episode right now.
Yeah, this is a 2-hour episode of you talking, and you have done plenty.
It's an hour and a half. Have I done enough?
I can't imagine what more you can do. So I feel like...
All right, let's not do it. Let's get out of here.
I think you did fantastic. I don't think...
well, whatever. I did it.
I think the music was really cool. I think the concept was fascinating.
Great. You're welcome. All right, everybody. We are going to take off. I don't know what our next show is going to be because I don't see. My life is an open book. I gave a show date to Stan Freeze and he hasn't responded to me. My worst dream is coming true. That he talked to his son and he was like, "Don't go on that stupid show." And so now I'm getting ghosted by Stanford Freeze, and I feel bad. So I don't know. Hey, there he goes. There we go. So I don't know what our next show is going to be, but it's going to be something. I'm going to hit Stan up tomorrow and be like, "Dog, what's up?" But nicely, because I'm a nice guy.
Sure.
Tell him I'll try to finish reading his book.
Well, I gave it to him like a month out because I need time to finish reading his book. So I don't want to be like, 2 days before, be like, "Hey, are you still coming on?" And be like, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, I don't want to read his book if I'm not going to get anything out of it." You know what I mean? It's just how I am. I don't know. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time. We'll see you in the... Oh, by the way, hit us up on Twitch, twitch.tv/EarzUp. I'm going to be doing some more streaming over there. Mr. P and I did Sea of Thieves the other night. We did some of the Pirates of the Caribbean pack, and that was fun. And I'm working the kinks out for streaming, but we're going to be doing some more games and stuff over there. So check us out if you're a Twitch person. All right. Until next time, we'll see you.